Joining us right now, Ranjit Shahani. He's the chairman at JB Chemicals and Pharma and also former MD at Novartis India. Mr. Shahani, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining in. Morning, firstly. Help us understand what is really your view on the entire Indian pharma space and how is it that you think Indian companies are moving up the value chain as we continue to be the pharmacy capital of India?
Morning. So, the Indian pharma majors have to reevaluate their current role within the global pharma industry. They need to explore possibilities to consolidate and strengthen their positioning in the value chain from a pure play generics to complex generics to biosimilars to vaccines and finally NCEs, new chemical entities. For example, the complex generics market is a $45 billion market growing at 15% per annum. In fact, the first generation of pharma entrepreneurs had made an initial foray by investing in R&D, but the lucrative generics US market of the past ensured postponement of best of their plans. Now it's come to a full circle, with US generics prices having fallen by 20% plus additional pressure building on healthcare costs. Moving up the value chain for Indian pharma is an urgent imperative. Now, of course, many companies are making moves to get into specialized generics, specialized injectables, and complex biosimilars. Some have achieved some success, but pure R&D play is still some time away. And of course, in R&D, a standalone model may not be feasible for Indian pharma at the moment. And partnerships with global pharma majors is certainly an opportunity. And of course, India's success, whether it's in Covaxin or Bharat Biotech or manufacture of Covishield by Serum Institute, are prime current examples of what Indian pharma can achieve in short periods. And finally, CDMO and CRAMS are other opportunities because there's a continued interest of global pharma to augment internal research with lower cost, reliable outsourcing.
Sure. Wanted to also help understand, while, India is also going to be importing the vaccine to try and meet the, vaccine requirement for such a large population. But given that we're domestically manufacturing vaccine as well, and we're exporting it to other countries too up until recently, what is the size and opportunity when it comes to purely COVID-related plays within pharma?
So, COVID has clearly highlighted the importance of a strong healthcare system, the lack of which can put an entire nation's economy and society at risk. So there is an opportunity for the Indian pharma industry to consolidate on its advantages and undertake fundamental reforms to reignite innovation-led growth, And there is a huge potential to expand the countries as a global innovation hub of the future. And of course, some of the top Indian pharma companies are making significant efforts in all these opportunities. But a lot more needs to be done to build on success and visibility of the recent vaccine success. And of course, it's not only vaccines, which is obvious, but all the concomitant drugs used in treatment of COVID has seen a spurt in demand. So each of these co-prescriptions adds an opportunity, not only in India, but to all the export markets where these drugs are needed. And then, of course, there is the China factor, which we can talk separately about.
If I look at an example of IT sector, when the IT sector mushroomed up, let's say 15, 20 years ago, there were 4 large companies. And 20 years after that also, the 4 companies remain the same, which is TCS, Infosys, Wipro, Tech Mahindra, and to a large extent HCL Tech. Do you see the same happening in pharma as well? 8-10 years ago, amount of mid-cap pharma companies which have mushroomed up were huge. But now we go back to the top 4 or 5 names.
So, the top 10 pharma companies supply 40% of India's demand. And if you take the other 10 on top of it, top 20, that is 60% of India's demand. So there is a very large number of mid-sized companies, and there is bound to be consolidation, restructuring, because currently this market share of each company is honestly very small. But there is a lot more to happen, and over the next 5 to 10 years, we certainly will see a lot more happening over here.
Now, the technology sector, I'm using Shahani just parallels here because IT is technology based and pharma is also chemistry at the end of the day, which is again an IP business. Technology sector has evolved from being a Y2K solution provider to enterprise and now to digital and AI. How do you see disruption and migration happening in the pharma sector? Because generic companies have not really innovated a lot. What they've done is that they've simply managed to come out with solutions and processes of doing the same thing slightly differently, but there is no like platform change or digital change. Do you see that changing?
First of all, there is an opportunity both for the generic players and the pure play research players. Because what is in patent today becomes generic tomorrow. And 2/3 of the world's population and 65 or 80% of India's population can really afford generics business, not the pure play NCs, for which you need insurance cover, you need cross subsidy, you need access programs. But the fact is, the top 5 Indian pharma companies have been spending about 13% of their top line revenues in research. But if you add all this, the top 5 amount that they spend on research is just about 600 million US dollars. Now, if you take the top 5 global pharma companies, they spend 37 billion US dollars on research. Now, that's a scale of a difference. Now, purely if you give the cost reduction advantage, yet 600 million is a very small amount. So getting to the NCE space is still some time away, but there certainly is potential because I think we have very strong research potential. We've done the chemistry process very well so far. And I have very high hopes that we will have more and more breakthroughs coming soon. But as I said earlier on, partnership is the name of the game here between the global companies and Indian companies. They have complementary needs.
Right. Mr. Shahani, considering you've been at the helm of Novartis India and now at JP Chemicals, just wanted to understand, when you take a step back and observe the pharmaceutical/healthcare universe, where do you think the big disruption is going to come in from? Because much like technology, even healthcare is, and especially now because of COVID, almost an ever-changing universe.
It is true. There's so much happening now. And I think one of the biggest disruptors has been digital and online. So even if you take access to medicines, the e-pharmacies, which nothing happened for 7 years, in 7 months of COVID, they dramatically increased what is happening in e-pharmacy or e-consultancy. So the pharma companies also don't have to just deliver the pill. They have to deliver value. So there are going to be disruptions taking place going ahead. And some of these are related to what is happening on the technology front on terms of digital and e-pharmacies. And that's an interesting space. So soon you'll have technology companies and pharma companies collaborating. As somebody said in a lighter moment, Google will probably be the largest pharma companies going ahead with it.
Indeed. But that brings me to my next question. What happens to the PE universe? Because, while we largely on a daily basis, being a business news channel, focus on the listed universe, but there are a lot of other small pharma companies, which enable tech and digital plus healthcare requirements. Do you see a heightened PE interest as well into some of these smaller names?
No, of course, this is a very interesting space. There has been an increasing number of control deals emphasizing the need for a more involved approach to investing. If you look at it historically, between 2012 and 2019, most were minority deals. I think Rubicon was the only 100 million control deal in pharma. But 220 witnessed a new surge of control deals. If you remember the Sequent Carlyle, they took 74%, JB Chemicals, KKR, 54%. And potentially granules now. So there is increasing investor interest in this sector. And, Piramal Pharma, I think Carlyle invented 20% stake in that for 490 million. But you're absolutely right. there are a large number of mid-sized pharma companies which are ripe for takeover in terms of the complementary needs of what the PE firms already have, and also potential which they have in the pharma space. And as you know, as we talk, we're likely to see a slew of deals going ahead. And there is obviously dialogue between multiple PE firms and formulation and API players, And I missed, Advent acquisition of Bharat Serum. So there have been quite a few already this last year and this year. More to come. Interesting space to watch.
So if you have to, let's say, invest in a pharma theme, and again, it's a very complex sector. There is API on one side, there is vaccine on the other side, there's biosimilar, which is the new wave, so to speak. Then you got pure contract manufacturing. Where do you think the growth really could be strong and high? Because the formula which investors have used is that look at company which gets large business from US, they should have some pricing power, and that stock has created pressure. How will investing in pharma in this decade be different from investing in pharma from the last decade?
So, first of all, these are multiple opportunities, and each sector has an opportunity, and different companies are specializing in different parts of this opportunity. So there are companies who've done very well in the CDMO CRAMS place, So there are companies which are pure API players, but very often, even in API, you need to go to multiple state synthesis of product. You can't have simple products like ibuprofen being made. I mean, that's a volume game. But, if you have 14 state synthesis, that's where you can specialize. And again, US is not the only market. I mean, look at Japan. It is difficult to get in, but once you are there, you're a customer for a long time. So all these areas, whether it's biosimilars, API, CDMO, CRAMS, each segment is a growth opportunity. And amongst all the countries, India is really positioned extremely well in this whole segment. And again, I mentioned China a little while earlier. And, the Chinese are smart. Even though there is a production-linked incentive, PLI scheme this government is pushing, where we want to manufacture these 53 key bulk drugs and intermediates and KSMs. And the scheme was announced. I think it's still not attractive enough for all pharma majors to beat their path to take advantage of this. And, the Chinese are smart. Where they have a monopoly, they will increase their price. But where there's competition, they are very smart at cutting and the prices, and they anticipate competition. So Chinese, at the moment, still outmaneuver India. But I think over the medium term, 3 years, I think India's got an opportunity in all these 3-4 segments that you mentioned.
Oh, it's a really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. Let's take